All right, welcome back to Spanish-American War and the reason we fight it. Remember that our essential question was the Spanish-American War motivated more by realism or idealism? This is your assessment question. We'll work on that next week. Remember the definitions of realism, which is our relations with other countries should be guided by self-interest, and idealism, which is a belief that values and ideals should influence how we relate to other countries, things like democracy, liberty, and rights. So keep those in the front of your mind. That'll make this exercise a whole lot easier and will be ultimately what you show me on the test, that you can do those two things. You should have your notebook out. You've got that T-chart already created. So as we go through the next four reasons for the Spanish-American War, you can jot those down. Okay? Just as a reminder, this is where we last left off the video, was the reconcentration camps, and we talked about how awful these were. They look like Nazi Germany Holocaust concentration camps. In reality, these are in Cuba. Before 1900, the reconcentration camps of Butcher-Weiler. So that's where we left off. In response to that, a senator from Maine, I believe, whose name was Proctor, he will go to Cuba to investigate the situation there, and he's going to come back and he's going to give a speech on the floor of the Senate. And in that speech, he's going to talk about how horrible the conditions in Cuba are, and he's going to kind of prod the United States to maybe do something about it. And that, therefore, it's idealism, because we're trying to spread rights and democracy and those kinds of things to the people of Cuba, and really not to a self-interest of the United States. There's a picture of him, and famously in his speech, he kind of wraps it up with the entire the entire native population of Cuba struggling for freedom and deliverance from the worst misgovernment which I ever had knowledge. Basically said that there's been no government as bad as what Spain has. Moving on, Cuban sugar plantations are going to be another reason that we fight a war against Spain, and that's because Americans in the 30 to 40 years before the war are going to become heavily invested in Cuban sugar plantations. American businesses are going to own plantations of sugarcane in Cuba. And one of the reasons we're going to fight there is then to defend our investments in Cuban sugar. We're going to go in there to make sure that neither the Cubans nor the Spanish destroy our sugar plantations. So that would be realism. And you can see there's a picture of a Cuban sugar plantation from about this time, and there's even a dollar from the Eastern Cuba, or $1,000 bill from the Eastern Cuba Sugar Corporation, which was an American corporation that owned a plantation in Cuba for sugar. So that would be realism, because we're protecting our own interests, which is clearly self-interest. The third one for today is Senator Albert J. Beveridge's speech about resources in Cuba. He's the guy that the video talked about from John Green. He was a senator from Colorado. He's going to talk about the natural resources that Cuba has that could help the United States. So if it's a benefit to us, it's going to be clearly realism. And he'll give this long speech on the floor of the Senate talking about that we should intervene to get Spain out of Cuba. Maybe we could even take over Cuba and get our resources out of there. He's going to talk about these millions of acres of timber that were never touched. And the fact that if we took over Cuba with all these resources, that every man in America would benefit in terms of living conditions, in terms of wages, those kinds of things. And let's face it, when you look at the picture, nobody rocks a hat better than Albert J. Beveridge. The last one for today is the Filipino Rebellion for Independence. We've talked thus far all about Cuba, but the Philippines are a Spanish colony, and they're undergoing a rebellion from the locals there too. This is the Filipino Rebellion. And if we go to war with Spain to help the Filipinos get their independence, that's idealism, because the benefit is somebody else, and it's spreading our morals and values like democracy, liberty, and rights to other places of the world. It's important to remember that the guy in the picture here, that's Emilio Aguinaldo, and he's the leader of the Filipino independence movement, and he's going to be really important in fighting against the Spanish. And then once we defeat the Spanish, he's going to turn his attention to try to get America out of there as well, for good reason, by the way. But we'll talk more about him in the next chapter even. But that's Emilio Aguinaldo, the leader of the Filipino independence movement. So there's the 4 things for today. You should have them as realism or idealism, and we've got 4 more to cover tomorrow, and we'll finish up our notes then.